The Zorthian fleet hung in low orbit, a symphony of blackened steel and pulsating lights, each vessel a testament to the supreme efficiency of their civilization. The grand warship, unyielding calculation, stood at the helm, an imposing spearhead of conquest. For millennia, the Zorthians had dominated lesser species, imposing their cold, logical order upon chaotic worlds. Earth would be no different. Fleet Commander 09, a paragon of Zorthian precision, stood rigid in the command chamber, his mandible-like appendages clicking in quiet calculation. His eyes flicked to the holographic display. Thousands of Zorthian warships hovered over the blue-green planet, their weapons primed. "Commence the ultimatum," he ordered, his voice smooth as polished steel. Across every human communication channel, a transmission interrupted the daily flow of cat videos and political arguments. A dark screen flickered to life, revealing a towering Zorthian figure, draped in ceremonial war regalia. His voice was deliberate, emotionless. "Humans of Earth, you are now subjects of the Zorthian Empire. Your resistance is illogical. Your weapons are primitive. Surrender, and your integration will be painless." A moment of silence followed. Then the response came. A single voice, broadcasted across the same channels. A news anchor, sipping coffee, his tie slightly askew. He blinked at the camera. Yeah, hi, this is Earth. We're a little busy right now, so if you could leave your number, we'll get back to you." The entire Zorthian fleet hesitated. Shirl 9 narrowed his gaze. Perhaps they did not understand the gravity of our message. "Repeat the ultimatum." The transmission was sent again. This time, the response came faster. A flood of human-made memes, jokes, and crude drawings of the Zorthians filled the screen. Images of their imposing warships edited into children's cartoons. A pixelated image of the fleet commander wearing oversized sunglasses with the words, "Deal with it," flashing underneath. A low murmur of confusion spread among the bridge officers. "Commander," one of them hesitated, "our intelligence reports no species has ever responded to a declaration of war in this manner." Zyril 9's mandibles twitched. "Their strategy is irrelevant. Begin the demonstration strike." In the skies over North America, a single warship descended. Its pulse cannons locked onto an uninhabited stretch of desert. Zorthian tradition dictated that a civilization be granted a final opportunity to surrender before annihilation. The beam lanced downward, liquefying sand into glass, sending a column of dust into the sky. For a moment, silence. Then came the next human response, a video, hastily edited, showing the explosion set to the tune of yakety sax. Shirl 9's hands tightened into fists. "Are they mocking us?" The answer was a resounding yes. Within hours, humans had turned the Zorthian invasion into a global event. Hashtags like, "Welcome Zorthians" and "Aliens can't even" were trending. An entire digital campaign had begun, with thousands of images portraying humans posing under the hovering warships with ironic thumbs-ups. One particularly baffling phenomenon was the appearance of billboards reading, "Earth's escape room. No refunds." A ground invasion was initiated. The first wave of Zorthian ground troops deployed into urban centers. Prepared for conventional warfare, they expected resistance, perhaps an attempt at negotiation. What they did not expect was chaos. The first casualties were not caused by enemy gunfire, but by an erratic human driving a small, rusted vehicle through the ranks of their landing forces while blasting Fortunate Son at maximum volume. The Zorthians returned fire, but the humans were, if anything, thriving in the insanity. Groups of them hurled fireworks at the invaders while filming themselves laughing. Drones painted with skull decals flew erratically through the air, dropping makeshift explosives. Some humans simply threw objects, bricks, furniture, even an entire toilet, at the soldiers. Worse still, their military communications were being hijacked. A Zorthian officer tried to relay orders to his battalion. Instead, his helmet's audio feed was overtaken by an aggressive, nonsensical human song, something about letting the dogs out. Panic crept into the disciplined ranks of the Zorthians. This was not war. This was not battle. This was something else entirely. By the time the sun set, the first wave had collapsed. Tactical retreat was ordered, and the Zorthians, for the first time in their empire's history, pulled back from an occupied city, not due to superior firepower, but due to sheer bewilderment. Zero 9 stood in stunned silence in the war chamber. One of his officers, still shaken, whispered, "Commander, they are not rational." Zero 9 did not respond. His mind raced through simulations, through all possible outcomes. And for the first time in his long, undefeated career, he realized something truly horrifying. They had made a terrible mistake. 09 stood motionless, staring at the holographic projections before him. Every conceivable outcome in his war algorithms had accounted for technological inferiority, strategic incompetence, or even mild psychological resistance from a conquered species. But not this. He had just watched the battle reports, if one could even call them that. Zorthian infantry, armed with plasma rifles capable of atomizing steel, had been routed by humans who fought using grocery carts, firecrackers, and an unholy mixture of street brawling and meme warfare. Tactical lines collapsed, not because of superior human weaponry, but because of sheer incomprehensible chaos. The ground forces were unprepared, he said at last, his voice measured but strained. They lacked discipline. One of his senior tacticians hesitated before responding. "Commander, with respect, they did not lack discipline. They lacked comprehension. Our soldiers are trained for war, but this is something else. Entirely." 09 turned sharply, his piercing eyes locking onto the officer. "Explain." The tactician's voice wavered. "The humans do not fight within any conventional structure. They do not adhere to logic. They do not even appear to adhere to their own rules of engagement. We have reports of soldiers abandoning cover to engage in close combat for no apparent reason. Others carried weapons they seemingly never used, opting instead to hurl insults and objects. One of our squads was neutralized by what the field officers are calling an exceptionally large refrigerator dropped from a rooftop." 09 clenched his jaw. Unacceptable. He turned back to the strategic display. The initial wave had been intended to cripple human morale, break their spirit. Instead, the opposite had happened. The humans had grown bolder. Cities had begun broadcasting their defiance across all frequencies. The internet, a primitive but frighteningly effective network of human information, had exploded with content mocking the Zorthians. The top-viewed video of the day was a montage of Zorthian troops in retreat, set to the soundtrack of a human song called Yakety Sax. It was a humiliation beyond reckoning. 09 slammed a fist onto the control panel. "Deploy the shock troops." The bridge went silent. Deploying the shock troops was a drastic measure, one reserved for planetary subjugation efforts that had escalated beyond expectation. These warriors were the elite, genetically enhanced, cybernetically improved, utterly devoid of hesitation. "Commander," the lead tactician ventured, "if we escalate to this level, we will crush them." 09 cut him off. End of discussion. Beneath the looming Zorthian warships, humanity prepared, but not in the way any sane species would. Instead of terror and despair, there was exhilaration. People had gathered in droves, using the invasion as an excuse for what one broadcaster called the most chaotic block party in recorded history. Streets were lined with makeshift barricades, not of steel or reinforced defenses, but of abandoned cars, shopping carts, and, in one particularly impressive case, a 15-foot-high wall of discarded fast food trays. The humans were not merely resisting, they were enjoying themselves. In New York, a group of hackers had successfully infiltrated Zorthian communications, and replaced all automated battle announcements with quotes from old action movies. Somewhere in California, an underground resistance group had repurposed drone technology, turning them into mobile airborne speakers that blared deafening dubstep at enemy patrols. And then there were the pranks. One squadron of Zorthian infantry reported stepping into what appeared to be a residential home, only to find themselves locked inside as a high-pitched siren blared the words, "Congratulations, you are the 1 millionth invader." The walls then ejected streams of confetti, and an automated voice cheerfully announced, "Please enjoy your stay in Earth's ultimate escape room." By the time the Zorthians managed to break free, they were met with a barrage of paintball rounds and an actual medieval-style catapult flinging flaming furniture. The war was no longer a war, it was a circus. And then the shock troops arrived. Unlike the first wave, these soldiers did not falter. They moved with machine-like precision, their armor repelling crude human projectiles, their advanced targeting systems locking onto anything that moved. The streets trembled under the force of their assault. Entire human barricades were vaporized in a single coordinated push. For the first time, a sense of dread crept through the human ranks. The chaos began to wane. Zorthian soldiers stormed streets, clearing intersections with ruthless efficiency. This was the true might of the Empire, an unrelenting, unstoppable force. And for a moment, 09 felt victory within his grasp. Then, he heard the music. At first it was barely perceptible, a faint, rhythmic pulse. Then it grew, louder, heavier. A strange pounding beat that seemed to reverberate through the very streets. The humans were doing something. The tactical displays on the Zorthian warships flickered. The troops on the ground faltered, their communications filled with static. And then, a voice. Not a human battle cry, not a desperate plea, a single, absurdly loud broadcast. "Are you ready, kids?" 09 frowned. "What in the name of the stars?" "Is that?" the voice returned, a chorus of thousands screaming in unison. "Aye, aye, Captain!" And then, chaos reigned once more. Somewhere, deep within the city, humanity had tapped into its most absurd weapon yet: cultural saturation. Giant screens flickered to life, displaying an ancient human cartoon of some kind. Speakers blasted, music so loud it rattled the ground. The shock troops, unprepared for psychological warfare of this caliber, stumbled. Then came the counterattack. Humans in costumes, bright, ridiculous outfits, stormed from alleyways. Men and women wielding homemade flamethrowers, fashioned from aerosol cans and lighters, charged toward the invaders, laughing as they sent plumes of fire into the night. One particularly audacious fighter charged into battle, wielding nothing but a baseball bat covered in Christmas lights, screaming "freedom" at the top of his lungs. The Zorthian tactical formations collapsed. They had no counter-strategy. Their technology was superior, their training unmatched, but they were utterly and completely out of their depth. The turning point came when an entire Zorthian command vehicle was hijacked by a group of teenagers who had, against all logic, somehow hot-wired it using nothing but a set of stolen jumper cables and the sheer power of trial and error. From the bridge of his warship, 09 watched in mute horror as his forces disintegrated. He had prepared for everything but this. One of his officers turned to him, eyes wide with something dangerously close to fear. "Commander, we need to withdraw." 09 did not respond. The screen before him now displayed an intercepted human broadcast, news anchors grinning ear to ear, footage of Zorthian troops fleeing interspersed with video clips of humans dancing in the streets. It ended with a simple, bold headline: "Alien invasion, lame, Earth still standing." 09's claws dug into the command console. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a whisper. "This is impossible." And yet, as the human celebrations raged below, as his fleet's grip on the planet weakened, he knew, impossible or not, his empire was on the brink of an unprecedented defeat. and it was only getting worse. The corridors of the unyielding calculation were silent save for the rhythmic hum of the ship's power core. Normally, the heart of the Zorthian flagship was a place of order, efficiency, and the controlled exchange of strategic brilliance. Now, it was filled with a grim and oppressive tension. Officers avoided eye contact, their rigid posture betraying unease. Zhural 9 sat at the war table, his claws tapping against the polished surface in a rhythmic pattern. His gaze was locked on the holographic projections before him, tactical reports, casualty estimates, psychological evaluations of the enemy. Nothing made sense. Every algorithm insisted that victory should have been swift. The humans lacked discipline. They lacked the technological capability to match Zorthian firepower. They were inefficient, disorganized, fragmented, and yet they were winning. Zhural 9 clenched his jaw as he played back the most recent battle footage. It was the same impossible madness. Zorthian shock troops, genetically enhanced, cybernetically refined, trained for precision warfare, had been scattered by a marching band. He fast-forwarded through the footage. The moment his elite soldiers took formation, a human resistance group launched an aerial assault, not with warships or precision drones, but with hundreds of rubber chickens dropped from rooftop catapults. The war chants of his soldiers had been drowned out by music, absurd, nonsensical music, broadcasted from hacked military speakers. In one particularly damning moment, a battalion had been neutralized, not by explosives, but by a swarm of humans. Wielding, of all things, leaf blowers modified to blast powdered paint into the air, blinding and disorienting his troops. His officers had warned him about humanity's unpredictability. He had dismissed it as primitive chaos, the desperate flailing of an inferior species. Now, he was forced to acknowledge the truth. They weren't just unpredictable, they were weaponizing it. His thoughts were interrupted by the hesitant approach of his chief intelligence officer, Vroth 17, Commander. Vroth 17 hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "We intercepted another human transmission." Zhural 9's eyes narrowed. Another attempt at psychological warfare. "It's worse." Vroth 17 tapped the console. The display flickered, showing a human in a worn-out military uniform. His face was partially obscured by a pair of dark glasses, and his voice was calm, almost casual. "Attention, alien invaders. You are losing." The officer took a long sip from a steaming cup, then leaned back in his chair. "We'd like to extend an official Earth tradition called the Mercy Rule, but, honestly, we're having too much fun." The display shifted, playing a montage of Zorthian failures. Troops slipping on ice dumped onto the battlefield, a transport ship covered in graffiti reading, "Welcome to Florida, no refunds," and a fleet of Zorthian drones that had been hijacked and reprogrammed to play 24/7 reruns of human sitcoms. The human officer continued, his tone almost sympathetic. "Look, we get it. You guys came in thinking you'd steamroll us. Big, scary warships, fancy tech, ruthless efficiency. That's all well and good. But see, here's the thing. You invaded a planet where people eat dangerously spicy food for fun. A planet where civilians will risk their lives just to post a video of themselves fighting you for internet points. A planet where clowns are considered entertainment, not psychological threats." The human leaned forward, lowering his glasses just enough to make direct eye contact with the camera. "You guys have two choices. Option 1. Keep fighting, and we'll escalate. We haven't even unleashed Australia yet." He smirked. "Option 2. Pack up and leave before we get bored and start doing something really stupid." The screen went dark. Zhural 9 did not move. Vroth 17 exhaled sharply. "Commander, Zhural 9 raised a hand, silencing him. For the first time in his long career, doubt crept into the Zorthian fleet commander's mind. No conquered species had ever spoken to him this way. No species had ever dared to turn a war into entertainment. The humans did not fight like a species struggling for survival. They fought like a species that enjoyed the challenge. His officers were watching him now, awaiting his command. His empire expected a decisive response. Shirl 9 inhaled slowly, steadying his thoughts. If he retreated, the Zorthian Empire would never recover from the disgrace. His name would be recorded in history as the first commander to lose to a species that thought duct tape was a valid engineering solution. If he escalated, he risked losing complete control. The situation was slipping from his grasp, and he hated it. "Order all remaining forces to regroup," he said finally, his voice sharp. "We will not withdraw. We will crush this resistance." His officers nodded, but there was hesitation in their eyes. The final offensive began the next day. The sky was darkened by Zorthian warships. Entire battalions of cybernetic warriors descended from the heavens, their formations precise, their armor gleaming under the glow of the planet's burning atmosphere. And yet, humanity did not run. They were waiting. The counterattack was unlike anything in recorded history. Zorthian forces had anticipated guerrilla tactics, explosive sabotage, and perhaps even underground resistance. They had not anticipated Operation Reverse Uno. As the warships descended, a signal went out across the planet. It was not a distress call. It was not a military directive. It was a public challenge. Humans across the world, seemingly working in unison, hacked into the Zorthian fleet's AI systems, not to disable them, but to upload an ancient Earth ritual, the Rickroll. Every single warship's internal displays flickered to life, broadcasting a human song, its lyrics confusing, its melody infuriatingly catchy. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. Zorthian officers scrambled to override the systems. They failed. The humans had booby-trapped their own infrastructure, forcing the invaders into maze-like corridors filled with motion-triggered voice recordings of old sitcom laugh tracks. A Zorthian armored convoy was neutralized by a swarm of VR skateboarders, who zipped between their formations, dismantling their weapons mid-stride and attaching "honk if you lost a war to clowns" stickers to their armor. In one particularly devastating psychological attack, an elite squadron of Zorthian commandos breached a human stronghold, only to find themselves inside a fully operational fast food restaurant, where human workers in brightly colored uniforms greeted them cheerfully. "Welcome to McDonald's. Would you like to try our new invasion-themed meal deal?" The commandos, utterly unprepared for this scenario, froze. A human in a cow suit handed them coupons. The war was over. Kirill 9 watched from orbit as his empire's greatest warriors accepted free samples of something called nuggets, while human children took selfies with them. He slumped into his command chair, his mandibles clicking aimlessly. It was finished. And yet the humans had not destroyed them. They had not executed their prisoners. They had invited them to dinner. Shirl 9 exhaled shakily, rubbing his temples. He had invaded a planet that did not fear him. A planet that laughed in the face of annihilation. A planet that somehow had won. And the worst part, they weren't even taking it seriously. Zyril 9 sat in his command chair, motionless, as the bridge of the unyielding calculation filled with the unthinkable silence. For the first time in Zorthian history, an invasion force had been decisively defeated, not by superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but by absurdity, by laughter. By a species that should have been begging for mercy, and instead had mocked them into retreat. His officers were slumped in their stations, no longer maintaining the rigid discipline that had defined the Zorthian military for centuries. Many had simply stopped responding to commands, staring blankly at screens now flooded with human broadcasts. He could still hear the echoes of their final offensive's humiliation, the sound of human pop music blaring across the battlefield, the footage of Zorthian shock troops ordering burgers at a fast food chain because they didn't know what else to do. It had taken everything in him not to self-destruct the fleet out of sheer embarrassment. But now, there was only one decision left to make. A transmission request appeared on the main console, an incoming signal from the surface. Zyril 9 exhaled slowly, then tapped the screen. The display flickered to life. A human appeared. A leader, perhaps. He was older, with streaks of grey in his beard, wearing some sort of military uniform that looked like it had seen better days. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on a cluttered desk, and smirked. 09, right? Or do I call you Commander? 09's mandibles twitched. I fail to see the relevance. The human chuckled. Yeah, well, I fail to see the logic in invading a planet where people willingly eat ghost peppers for fun, so I guess we're both dealing with some surprises today. 09 clenched his fists. If you have contacted us merely to mock our failure— Oh, no, the human interrupted, waving a hand. We already did that. Like, a lot. Seriously, you guys trended worldwide for days. There are already movies being pitched about this, and at least 3 streaming services want to turn it into a TV show. But that's not why I'm calling. 09 narrowed his gaze. Then why? The human leaned forward. We'd like to make a deal. The bridge went still. A deal. 09 was certain he had misheard. You wish to negotiate terms of surrender? He asked cautiously. The human burst into laughter. Oh no, you guys already lost. This isn't a negotiation. This is an offer. 09's fingers twitched over the console. Explain. The human laced his fingers together. See, here's the thing. You came here expecting to conquer us, and instead you got, well, let's be honest, you got utterly wrecked by memes and bad life choices. But in the process, we learned something about you too. 09 frowned. And what exactly did you learn? That you guys are terrible at improvisation, the human said bluntly. I mean, sure, your tactics work against most civilizations. Your empire's built on control, on order, on overwhelming force. But the moment you hit a species that thrives on chaos, you crumbled. You didn't just lose the battle. You lost the narrative. 09's fingers dug into the armrests of his chair. Do you take pleasure in rubbing salt in our wounds? The human shrugged. Nah, just stating facts, but that's where the deal comes in. 09's head tilted slightly. I am listening. We don't want to destroy you. I mean, sure, we could probably take your fleet apart at this point just by tricking you into doing it yourselves, but that's not the point. The point is, your people clearly aren't ready for a fight like this. But you know who is? The humans. Smirk widened. Us. The bridge went dead silent. 09 processed the words carefully. You are proposing an alliance? The human grinned. Not just any alliance. A partnership. 09 leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Go on. The human laced his fingers together. Your empire's got technology, infrastructure, a military force that, let's be honest, is really good at fighting things that play by the rules. But you know what you don't have? Adaptability, insanity, the ability to turn an unwinnable situation into a joke that demoralizes your enemies beyond repair. 09 exhaled sharply. And you are suggesting that we learn from you? Oh, not just learn. Hire us. The human leaned back, smirking. Think about it. Instead of trying to crush planets under your boot, you let us handle the messy stuff, the psychological warfare, the unpredictability, the meme campaigns. 09's mind reeled at the concept. You wish to weaponize your own chaos? Buddy, we already have, the human said, grinning. You just got the free trial version. For the first time since the invasion began, 09 hesitated. Not out of fear, not out of frustration, but out of something dangerously close to intrigue. This was unprecedented. The Zorthian Empire had always relied on order, on control. But they had just suffered the worst defeat in their history at the hands of a species that flourished in chaos. Would it not, then, be logical to harness that very chaos for their own benefit? 09 exhaled slowly, staring at the human before him. And what exactly would your species demand in return? The human smiled. Well, for starters, we want space travel, access to your technology. Oh, and a seat at the table whenever your empire makes big decisions. If we're going to be your special operations division, we want a say in how things are run. Zyril 9's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. And if I refuse? The human gestured vaguely. Then we'll keep doing what we're doing. You'll probably limp back to your empire, tell them you lost to a bunch of internet trolls and guys with Roman candle launchers, and spend the next few decades trying to figure out how to explain that to your war council. He grinned. Or, you could join us. Zyril 9 considered this. It was unorthodox. It was absurd. It was insane. And yet, so was everything that had happened. He had seen firsthand what humanity could do when unleashed. They were not merely a force of destruction, they were a force of disruption, and perhaps that was exactly what the Empire needed. Slowly, deliberately, Zyril 9 straightened in his chair. This will not be easy, he said finally. The human grinned. Oh, trust me. We know. A long silence stretched between them. Then, at last, Zyril 9 reached forward, tapping the console. Then let us begin. And with that, the greatest alliance in galactic history was born, between an empire built on control and a species that had none.